Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's discussion on the future of the way we work. We learn. My name is Sarika, and I will be moderating this evening's panel. Before we begin, I'd just like to remind you again that we have simultaneous translations available in Sinhala and in Tamil, and the option is available at the bottom of the screen. So just to start us off, the COVID-19 pandemic has in many ways kickstarted a global transition to online learning. And today's discussion will delve into how the pandemic has shifted the way in which schools function and how some of these transitions to online and distance learning, as well as the increased use of digital learning tools, have influenced and shaped the way in which we learn in the future. Today, we will discuss not only some of the challenges that these changes may pose, especially in Sri Lanka, where access to internet and devices is not always equitable, but also the merits of some of these changes, particularly in terms of how they can help bridge gaps in access to a quality school education. On that note, I would like to introduce you to our esteemed panelists for this evening. We have with us today Mr. Frank Van Kapel, Regional Education Specialist from UNICEF. We also have Mr. Neil Gunadasa, Additional Secretary to the State Ministry of Education Reforms, Open Universities and Distance Learning Promotion. Dr. Sujata Gamage, Senior Research Fellow at Learn Asia and Co-Coordinator of Education Forum Sri Lanka. Also joining us today is Mr. Sobi Tavil, Director, Future of Learning and Innovation, UNESCO. We also have Ms. Amra Ayub from CurveUp and Mr. Jake Bell from Code.org. I am now going to ask each of the panelists to share with us some of their thoughts on the future of learning. I will invite each one of you in turn to speak. As discussed, you will have 5 minutes. We will do our very best to stick to time so that we have plenty of time for a discussion and for the audience to ask questions as well. So if I may invite Mr. Frank Van Kapel to just talk to us a little bit about the continuity of learning in a post-pandemic world and to provide a bit of a regional overview of how we've seen things play out over the last year or so.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, and thank you so much to the colleagues at UNDP for the invitation to be part of this dialogue, and it's an honor to be part of this prestigious panel to give a few reflections, as you say, on the continuity of learning during COVID-19 and also the future of learning and challenges. So in a few minutes, I just wanted to touch on perhaps 3 key things, which are somewhat related, not entirely, but somewhat related. So I'll try to create that thread between the 3. And the first one is, I think, the under-acknowledged importance of smartphones during COVID-19 and beyond. And I'll explain why under-acknowledged in a minute. Second, I think, is an interesting shift towards learning outside the classroom and not just inside the classroom. And third, a little bit about educational games, a few thoughts on educational games and gamified learning experiences in the context of how we need to think about the future of learning. So first about smartphones, and that's a really interesting one, I think, because that's very much been a key focus for us since COVID-19 started in March last year. So I'm in the UNICEF Regional Office for South Asia, and we've been supporting all 8 country offices in the region, including Sri Lanka, on continuity of learning surveys and distance learning during COVID-19. But let me backtrack just a little bit and start with March last year, when we did an analysis of household surveys to find out what technologies households have access to and what would be the best way to reach all children, or as many children and youth as possible. And we found that the approaches with the most potential were printed packs or kits. Of course, you can reach all children with those, even if they don't have technology, but also mobile phones, which almost all households have access to. Though we acknowledge we don't have good access on good data on smartphones, and television. So we also did a survey afterwards, and we find that throughout the region, from the results so far, smartphones are actually the #1 or #2 technology facilitated learning modality in the region, and including in Sri Lanka. And interestingly, while we have focused a lot on mobile since the beginning of the response, this wasn't the case everywhere. And I think globally, a lot of the, I think globally, mobile phones have been a little bit neglected in continuity of learning strategies, in analysis, et cetera, et cetera. So I think this experience is transforming the way we think about learning, but also how we think about leveraging smartphones. And this also has to do with our own bias, which we have to acknowledge. We're probably using, quite likely we're using a computer right now. When we think of distance learning, home learning, we think about laptops, you think about tablets, we think about computers, and that's our own personal bias. But most people in South Asia, of course, and including in Sri Lanka, they don't have a computer, they don't have a tablet, you know, they don't have a PC, but what an increasing percentage of households have access to is a smartphone, becoming cheaper and cheaper, you know, starting at maybe 20, 30 US dollars. And we've seen that really a great usage of smartphones, and also to a lesser extent, but also having potential for this is regular feature phones. And how did that happen? It's because they exist in households. And I think even if they weren't very prominent in continuity of learning strategies, somehow they were being leveraged. And I think that's thanks to the school leaders, that's thanks to teachers, thanks to parents and students who are somehow leverage this modality in different ways, in very interesting ways. And I can even reflect on my own family, because I have 3 young children. Sometimes we run out of devices, and we ourselves have used smartphones extensively during COVID-19. So I can see, and also based on, you know, discussions and evidence we're trying to collect, how they're being used. And they're used in so many different ways. They're used to view and access learning materials and exercises. They're used to take photos of written homework, to watch recorded lessons, engage in live lessons, recognizing that internet is a barrier for many, but a lot of things can also be done offline. Like, as I mentioned, you do your homework and you take a photo and send that photo. And educational games, I'll talk a bit about that later. So there are so many possibilities, and it doesn't require a sophisticated digital classroom, but what we've seen is that actually regular social messaging apps like, you know, WhatsApp, Viber, Facebook Messenger, whatever is in use, what's popular, those have actually been leveraged for all those things, almost all of those different modalities of learning. So I think going forward, we will really need to see how we can, you know, utilize smartphones, and ideally also looking at feature phones, but using them more strategically and systematically during school closures, and also going forward in blended and hybrid approach to learning. Just very quickly on the other 2 points, I might be going a bit over time, but in terms of the shift in attitudes towards learning outside the classroom, that's the second point. So obviously during COVID-19, we had suddenly a lot of children learning from home. Not all children, unfortunately, not all children had the opportunity. But there's a lot of talk now about reimagining education and rethinking education globally. Also, I'm aware of some of the reforms in Sri Lanka. So COVID-19 has definitely really accelerated the thinking and the momentum. And I think one key element is the shift in attitudes, that learning doesn't just take place in the classroom. It can take place anywhere, it can take place anytime, can continue after school is finished, and not just, you know, traditional homework, but also new ways of learning, technology facilitated learning. Even for those who don't enroll in college or tertiary after school, it can continue for them. It can continue for those who drop out of school, for NEETs, which is abbreviation for not in education, employment, or training. So there's lots of opportunities, and I think this has always been kind of in the background. But now we're thinking about, you know, how we can scale this, how we can do this to a much greater extent compared to how we might have done this before. And there's of course many challenges. There's the digital divides, infrastructure divide, digital skills, the gender digital divide. But I think there's a lot more scope now to kind of dream big and think of sustainable and scalable approaches. And also just looking at what's already exists, what technologies do households already have access to and leverage them. This hasn't always been fully leveraged. We're seeing that from results that technologies that households have access to aren't always used, interestingly enough, for learning, but they could be. So there's a kind of underutilization in a sense. And then also in schools, what exists out there? Looking even at the smartphones, which are in teachers' pockets. How can we leverage those? So I think that's one of the ways in which we can think about how learning can happen, not just in the classroom, but also with support from teachers and school leaders, also outside the classroom. And then maybe just very, very briefly on the third point in educational games and gamified learning experiences. And I don't think I'm the most qualified person here to talk about that, but just my own personal experience. I've been watching this evolve over the last almost 20 years. When I did back then I did my master's thesis on educational games, and it was a really new topic back then. But I still think this is a relatively new and under-researched topic, how we can leverage gamified learning experiences, educational games, which are self-motivating in a way. And just highlighting one key limitation, which I think has kind of been a drawback in how we think about educational games over the past decades, really, is that when we think of educational games, we often think about traditional content areas, learning math, learning how to read, learning your ABCs, add in maybe some puzzles. But if you look up educational games, if you look them up on an app store, on the website, that's the kind of thing that you get. But I think that is a very limited view of what we can achieve, and especially in the ongoing environment of 21st century skills reform, including in Sri Lanka. That's where we need to focus on as well. How can how we can use educational games to leverage 21st century skills like problem solving, collaboration, creativity, build your imagination. So that's my last point, that I think that's something we can consider further in terms of the future of learning. So thank you so much. And sorry if I took too much time.
That's fine. Thank you, Mr. Venkata. I think we will come back to talk a little bit about gamification later on in the day as well. If I can now ask Mr. Gunadasa to speak to us a little bit about the State Ministry's approach to education reform in a sort of post-COVID context, looking at e-learning modalities and what some of the changes that we might expect to see in the next few years. Mr. Gunadasa?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity, especially to discuss the current situation and also the way forward plan of the Ministry of State, Ministry of Education reforms. So since last 2020, March 20th, we faced this situation because of the COVID-19. And in April 20th, we managed to start the first TV education program called Guru Gedara, in order to mitigate the problems that we face because of the school vacation during the last period. And that period, we focused the grade 5 and grade 10 and grade 11 to the national television channel. And phase 2, the second pandemic situation, we managed to deliver the telecast the lessons from grade 3 to grade 13, and we are using the national channel for 16 hours per day to deliver the lessons. While I'm going through this session, I will explain the overall concept of the State Ministry of Education reform. We have two arms. One is education reforms arm. The other one is the distance learning arm. So the distance learning arm is the arm where I am heading. So we are working with the National Institute of Education, universities, Information Communication Technology Agency, and the TRC. So with this overall structure, we have identified the 7 areas to address the future requirements as well as the current requirements. So we have identified the major areas as one is distance learning mechanisms, content and delivery. The other one is policy framework. The third part is the training and capacity building. And the fourth part is the infrastructure facilities and the access. And the fifth one is the centers, where we have to identify in addition to the school, we have in Sri Lanka called computer resource centers. So those centers we are now going to establish as the distance learning hubs. At the moment, we have nearly about 77 centers in the island wide. We are focusing to establish 99 centers, one for each zone. And the other part is expanding this e-learning concept and distance learning modes to the National College of Education, where the teacher trainees are being trained, and also the other training centers under the Ministry of Education. And finally, the monitoring and evaluation mechanism. So with that, we last 2020 budget that focused to the 2020 year, 2020 budget for at the end of the year, we have to submit the proposals to the 2021. So with that, we managed to get the funding from the government to expand the education TV program together, and also to provide the TVs to the schools where the 2000 schools below 200 students. So at the moment, we have nearly about 5,118 schools with the less than 200 students. And also, you know that Ministry of Education has established a learning management system called e-Taksala. So the government has approved, the Cabinet of Ministers has approved the e-Taksala as the national e-learning platform for the general education system on last 4th of January this year. And also we are focusing the 1,169 proposed national schools. So under the reforms, we are going to expand the number of national schools to 1,169. So this year we are focusing these national schools to be provided the required facilities in order to use these e-learning for the teaching and learning process. And also, as I mentioned, we are going to upgrade the computer resource centers which are in the zones to as the distance learning hubs. So these are the areas that we are focusing at the moment, and at the same time we are focusing the Nanasa TV channels and to expand the Nanasa TV to the schools and to provide more educational channels, more educational contents. And also we have already prepared the study packs for the students, self-learning studies packs in order to use them for the during the period that they couldn't go into the school. So then we are going to deliver those. In fact, already we have uploaded this information, the content to the e-Taksala. And also we have already started short code 1916 to provide the assistance to the students when they are in the teaching learning process, when they face some problem in the subject, there's a question in the subject, so they can directly call this number and get this assistance. And also, as I mentioned, we are going to expand the Guru Gedara Education TV program. We are planning to get the TV channel spectrum for the Education Ministry on spectrum, so then we can deliver the content through that our own TV channel without any problem, and we can provide the content for grade 1 to grade 13. And also we are expanding the e-Taksala LCMS and e-Taksala LMS in order to utilize this a maximum way for the students. And in future we will provide the login details for the schools. In fact, with the last COVID situation, we have started using this e-Taksala LCMS for the National College of Education. We have 19 National College of Education, out of which we have completed the 9 National College of Education using this e-Taksala. And at the moment, Jaffna College of Education is perfectly using the e-Taksala learning management system for their teaching and learning process with the teacher trainees. And also, very soon we will be starting the broadcasting the contents through the regional broadcasting services in the island. So where you can reach more students, because we all know that whatever the mode that we are using, there are few sets of students they won't get that facilities, and they won't get this learning teaching. They couldn't come for the teaching and learning process. So therefore, we have decided to use whatever the possible mechanisms and methodologies in order to reach the students. We are very soon, we are going to expand this computer resource centers, as I mentioned, distance learning hubs. And with the distance learning hub, we will provide the distance learning courses more with the distance learning mode. And probably we will use 60 to 40, but 60% of course content will be provided through the online as a self-learning modules, and 40% they may have to come to the centers, or then otherwise we can provide the service through the virtual platform. These are the plans that we have, and we are going to expand the number of centers, as I mentioned earlier, to 99 centers. We have already 77 centers, and within this 6 months crash program, we are going to upgrade, and we are going to provide whatever the resources they need and whatever the human resources they need in order to take these centers for the future specific centers as a learning centers for this type of situation. And also, National College of Education, we are planning to provide the all courses in the dual mode, like blended mode. So then they can make use of this content even if they face this type of situation in future. And also, we are trying to see the possibilities to the e-Taksala to do the online examination to the e-Taksala platform. and hopefully we will be able to test this during this year, before end of this year. These are the major achievement and major plans that we have. And also, I want to tell that during this last 20 months, maybe about 1 year, our teachers, they have, as Frank mentioned, our teachers and principals, they have tested different type of mechanism to provide the teaching and learning environment for the students. And we have, I think I'm so happy about tell that most of the schools, they have done a great job, and most of the teachers, most of the principals, they have done a great job. And as he mentioned, while they are doing the virtual sessions, they are sharing the assignments and sharing the answer sheets through the WhatsApp. So these things we have experience and practices in our country. And also some schools, they are doing the full virtual school during this period from 7:30 to 1:30, and it's a full virtual class with the timetable. And so this type of the practices we have some best practices. And in future, very soon, we are going to, as the State Minister of Education Reforms and Distance Learning, we are going to take these best practices and we are going to implement those best practices in the country, trying to get it all the schools and all the centers, all the teaching centers under this ministry. So these are the things that we have understand, and these are the plans that we have. And very soon, within 2 years, we will be able, we are trying to reach the place where we want to go very soon. That is, we are going to establish the National Content Development Center under the Ministry of State Education Reforms. So where that is the place where we have all these blended learning and virtual learning taking place. Thank you very much. I hope that I took the proper time.
Thank you, Mr. Vinodasa. I think that was very helpful, and it also sort of touched a little bit on what Frank spoke about in terms of utilizing the resources that we have on hand as well. So that's really great to see. If I can now ask Dr. Gamage to just talk to us a little bit about the work that they've been doing at the Education Forum Sri Lanka in terms of understanding what the challenges we have had to face in implementing online learning, especially, and to give us a little bit of insight into what she thinks the future of learning in Sri Lanka might look like as well. Dr. Gamage?
Yes. Thank you, Sarika. Yes, thank you, Sarika. Yes, on September 25th, Education Forum Sri Lanka, we had a policy dialogue, and Professor Kapilapera, the secretary, came and talked about my internet video. Yes. Okay, right. Talked to us about infrastructure and everything. And something I told him at that time is, this is all fine, Professor Pera. But this is supply side. You're telling us what you're doing from the ministry, from Colombo. What we are interested is in the demand side. How is it felt at the schools? And he very humbly, he said, yes, that is true. We are talking about what we're doing in the ministry. He had whole half an hour to do that. So, and then we took upon he said, actually, we should do that. But I know the ministry, ministries usually can't change their course like that. So we did a survey with our limited resources. We asked across the country, 24 districts, 2 teachers from each, one from a well-resourced school and one from less resourced schools. How did they reach their students? And we picked the teachers who made the best efforts so that the percentages we get is the high estimate. And we did find, what did we find is only they were able to reach only 45% of the students, and 1% for 4% of that through Zoom, Team, and other things, other synchronous virtual classroom experience kind of thing. And the other 41% WhatsApp, using smartphones, just disseminating, sending out notes and assignments. So that is what happened, really. And 55% were left off. So this is, now the topic of today is near the future of the way we learn. And I'm going to say where you learn. I'm addressing the audience here. How would you be learning in the next 12 months or next 24 months? Or if not you, if you're mostly older people, then how about your children, your brothers and sisters, people in your lives? I think it's not going to change a whole lot, because we will not be increasing our infrastructure all that much, because Learn Asia did a survey. I like to tell UNESCO, actually, so informed. For 5 countries in Asia, we have data. This was internationally scientific sample of from each country, 6 countries. And we found that indeed smartphone ownership in Sri Lanka is 48%, 34% access to internet. So those numbers jive with the numbers we got, that only 45% of the households can be reached. So in the near future, are this going to get changed? I doubt it. So in the near future, the smartphone, as at the beginning, the UNICEF representative said, and TV lessons and e-Takshila were the other 2 things we mentioned. TV lessons, we really asked it. I think, again, it's a supply side information. We really should do a survey, good survey of how much TV was watched by students. We asked the teachers how many of their students. The estimate is not very good, but said 25% at least once. They did not continue to watch. What was the reason? Because a TV lesson is not just a lesson, is just broadcasting a lesson, or child listening to a lesson is not education. The child has to engage. And how does the child engage? With the teacher. Because 50% of our children, the 55% who did not, the teachers could not reach, were not there, not just because of the technology, it's because their home background. Because these are the kind of children that our teachers have to constantly drag them back into the learning process. So because of that, I think the teacher role is critical, and broadcasting, once broadcast is gone into the ether and it's gone. So, and I heard recently that actually TV as a medium of distant learning has to be reevaluated. Our data so far says it is not successful. What would be successful is the TV lessons are now uploaded on in a channel, which is excellent. So we need to think of a way to what are the things we have now for the near future. How are we going to first the distant mode? Because anytime, we can just, if we have to close the schools again, how do we reach the students in the near future? I think we have to look at that glass half full situation. We have textbooks. As it was said, we have mobile phones in 96% of the households. And we have digital content is now available thanks to NIE and the ministry. It's been done for all the TV lessons. They may not be the best, but they have been done for all the lessons. And we have digital content. Smartphones, I know it's been looked at as a strong thing, it's a strength, that's something we use, but we surveyed parents, not across the country, but in 5 districts. We reach them through the teachers again. And what they find is it's really, they're concerned about giving a smartphone to a child just for use by themselves. We're talking about children in grades 1 to 11 here, not those in higher grades. And smartphone, therefore, I would again, as TV is not a good medium for distance education, smartphone, we really need to rethink of using it as for delivering content. Teachers have been sending content over the smartphone. How do teachers, students look at them? I mean, they have to borrow the smartphone from their parents. 48% of the households had smartphones, and maybe it has increased now, but it's a multi-use device for most houses. So I think, again, smartphone as from distance learning, I think we need to redefine its role. It has to be used for communication between the teacher and the student interaction, not static transfer of content. So how do we give content? I think some other thing we need to consider is digital TV in the homes. You download the content and you can review the content when you want, how you want. I mean, that's how we want to use technology. So I think probably in the near term, I would say digital TVs in the homes, and with digital content downloaded. It doesn't have to be shipped from the central ministry or anything. If they're available on the internet, it can be downloaded at the school level, at the home level, at the communication center level. So in the near future, I think smartphones we really can use feature phones or simple phones. There are these methods of doing video conferencing. using a regular feature phone. Dialogue at 1377, a teacher can have a conference call. So we should use valuable mobile phone time for student-teacher interaction, not for just downloading static content, PDF file after file. So I think smartphone use, yes, but we should think about the burden on parents and how we can use it in an optimal way, and doesn't have to be a smartphone, it turns out. You can use a regular phone with the 1377 facility that Dialogue has. It has to be expanded to other mobile providers. So to sum up, I think, the near future of the way we learn, the way you learn, would be, I think technology is going to be upper level schools, high income level schools, the upper 20%, they will use technology. We shouldn't have to worry about. Let's worry about the bottom 50%, bottom 30%. Well, they have mobile phones. Let's use them for productive activity, just for student-teacher interaction, only just for transmitting content. Think about downloadable content, which our ministry, NIE, I'm not sure about Itakshalava, but NIE, the TV lessons, and there's a lot of private providers. Amazing amount of work is done by NGOs doing good TV lessons. In Mana, NGO work with the Northern Provincial Authority, developing English lessons. So we need to really decentralize all this, get as much content developed from various sources that people decide. Is it NIE TV lessons? Is it Itakshalava, or is it DP Math? Which one would you use? There has to be choices, and we do have choices. So I think the near future looks good, but we need to look at optimizing, and we need to focus on the bottom 50%. Let's see the longer future. Maybe we can talk about it later. After 2-3 years, of course, then all the gamification, all that we can talk about.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Kamige. I think that was very helpful to kind of understand what some of the limitations are, as well as how we can capitalize on some of the tools that we already have at our disposal. On that note, I'd like to ask Mr. Sobithavil to talk to us a little bit about how the pandemic has essentially provided us with an opportunity to test out new methods and approaches to how students learn in a classroom setting and outside of it as well. And to just share a little bit with us on his experiences and how that has worked so far.
Thank you very much. And very pleased to be part of this conversation. Yeah, I mean, when we talk about the future of learning and what that might look like post-pandemic, we do have to think about, well, what have we learned over this past year? From our position in monitoring globally, I think one thing to sum it up is that the future of learning will be based on human connection. I say that for several reasons. I mean, technology has become central. What used to be a peripheral kind of discussion in education policies globally, either in terms of experimentation and innovation in more kind of advantaged educational situations, or leveraging technology, whether broadcast or mobile phones for reaching the unreached. It was technology pre-COVID was still not a central piece of the discussion. It now has become central and central in ensuring educational continuity through a combination of methods. So online and as the main platform in upper income countries, in wealthier contexts. In low income countries, it has often been a reliance on TV and radio broadcast complemented with take-home packages. And in most countries, it has actually been a combination. I think we heard, I mean, we use what we have at hand, but also a concern about the limited reach of distance learning, regardless of the technologies used. I mean, the most modest estimate worldwide is that at least a third of all students were not reached by any type of distance learning, regardless of the technology employed. We also know very little about the effectiveness of the distance learning. And what we do know, I mean, there is evidence that is emerging. What we do know is it works better in more advantaged households, families, communities. But we know very little, and I think Dr. Gamage started with that. We know very little from the demand side. Most of the information and data that we were monitoring initially is true was the supply side. I mean, what is being deployed in terms of distance learning? And now work is being done by many partners in looking at how effective has this been? How does it really play out in reality? And what's the perceived effectiveness of this? Human connection also, because teachers, and this was said, played a central part. I mean, considered frontline workers, have been often in difficult situations, unprepared and not necessarily trained, but have adapted and at least have tried to maintain contact and communication with their students. One of the first concerns in terms of the closures was really losing contact with students and their families. And this even in wealthier contexts where students who are already on the margins of the educational process could become disconnected from the process altogether. We often also speak about the digital divide in terms of connectivity, but we tend to overlook the human dimension. It's not only a technological issue, it's not only a technical issue, it's not only access to connectivity, to infrastructure, to data, to devices, even to learning platforms, but it's also about the skills. And one of the very early surveys that we did last year showed that one of the main barriers, and this across countries in the world, regardless of development status, was the lack of adequate skills, digital skills among students, even more so among teachers, and even more so among parents. And this was interesting to note across all countries, regardless of whether wealthy or poor. The human dimension also, because I think it's important to recall that in some countries in Asia, for example, even pre-pandemic, there was some resistance on the part of parents towards more digitalization of education. That young people are already spending a lot of time behind the screen. Concerns like this in Japan and in Korea, but also in middle-income countries like Indonesia and the Philippines. And that the school pre-COVID was seen as the one place where young people could perhaps spend less time behind the screen and actually interact physically and with others. So, I mean, just to say that we have rediscovered the importance of the physical space of the school, the social space of the school. We know that schools are more, and educational institutions, schools in particular, more than places of education and learning. There are social services, nutrition, school meals, free or discounted. There is a form of protection and psychosocial support. And we've really rediscovered that education, while some curricula study can be delivered at a distance, education is more than curricula study. And education involves social, civic learning, social, emotional learning. And this must be done with others, in interaction with others, with peers and teachers. So just to say that the future of learning we have rediscovered the human interaction that is at the center of this, and that we will need to, technology is certainly part of our future, regardless of the type of technology. But there will be a concern to balance that and to better appreciate what important learning can happen with others and with others and through interaction, collaborative work, and what can be done at a distance or on one's own. And I think these are the opportunities really in terms of innovation going forward. It's perhaps less about the technology, although there are very interesting innovations there as well. But it is about innovations in terms of curriculum, in terms of the use of educational institutions, the social spaces that they represent, to revalue some of the important learning beyond academic study, and that is important for individuals as it is for our societies. So I think a lot of innovation, a lot of opportunity for innovation in terms of curriculum, pedagogy, assessment. And I could give some examples later, but I'll stop here just to say the future of learning will be one that is centered or rediscovering and re-emphasizing that human dimension and the human interaction of that is education.
Thank you for that, Mrs. Howell. That's a bit of feedback. Thank you so much for that. I think you touched on something that is of the utmost importance, the need for human interaction. And I think that is something that has proved challenging in ensuring that students stay engaged. I think Dr. Gamagit touched on that as well. How do you ensure that your students stay engaged when you're talking to them online or via mobile phone? So I think that leads us nicely into the question that I'm going to pose to Ms. Amra Ayub, who I hope will share a little bit about her teaching practices and the challenges that they've had to overcome, and how and what techniques they've used in their classrooms to do that, to keep engaging with students and help them overcome some of the challenges in continuing to stay focused in class and so on. Amra, if I can hand over to you.
Thank you, Sarika. Very privileged to be part of this lovely panel, disseminating so much of information with so much of statistics with regards to what's going on with regards to education in Sri Lanka or across the country, across the world. I totally agree with the and appreciate the work that's been done by everyone in the panel today. But what I feel is that rather than looking at the cup half empty, like Dr. Sujata mentioned, I would like to look at the cup that's full. And of course, that's what we've been looking at, because let me share a quick story that happened over the weekend very recently. So I attended this wedding with my mom far away from town. And so there were these couple of women who were talking behind us saying, okay, hey, hasn't your kid started learning online? Isn't she using WhatsApp? Isn't she using your phone? And so the other lady says, no, we haven't, the teachers haven't approached us and stuff. So my mom turns back and she says, like, 7 years ago when I started e-learning, or when I started teaching online, soon after my higher studies, it was very tough to actually get people to come into that sort of thought, or come into the fact that, okay, why do we have to learn online? I mean, it's absurd. Or why do I have to like pay for internet package for this? Or why do I have to get computers or tabs or whatever for this, right? But fast forward, 2020 pandemic got everyone overnight, got themselves equipped, and even the teachers, that shift of mindset was like overnight. And being the superheroes they are, they self-taught themselves. Some of them, especially the baby boomers, right, who are usually not tech savvy, got themselves to learn how Zoom works, or learn how Google Meets or Teams work. And overnight they did something, and they wanted to continue the work they were doing in their physical classrooms. So slowly forwarding a couple of months later, after this happened, people started getting fatigued out again. The teachers started getting frustrated because less and less children turned up online, and the students were obviously very, very tired and frustrated, and what we call the Zoom fatigue, I guess, right? So then teachers started approaching us because we were always into teacher training and what are the ways that we could make a life better for a teacher and student online, that is. And then we realized, okay, so we want to give back to our community this time. And then we started off a series of webinars and series of programs where we could actually bring down one single fact: engagement. Engagement is the key to an online lesson, because I guess the answer is online or digital learning is the future, because it is the current status, at least. I totally agree. 45% or people who or 55%, like Dr. Kamage said, who don't turn up online, and like Mr. Frank said about the lack of smartphones and all of that. But that's definitely going to change because things have been changing, right? So I'm going to look very forward while I'm saying this, but what happens when you get all this infrastructure? What happens when you get all these devices and stuff? I mean, are the students, are the teachers skilled in order to get it in a very engaging way? And unfortunately, the majority answer would be no, actually, right? So teaching how engagement works is something that we have been focusing on. And with Curve Up, we have been designing teacher training programs with the technique of DDE, which is called design, deliver, and engage. So these three aspects are something that we sort of try to translate into a teacher for them to follow these three techniques. So, for example, when you take design, of course, design is an aspect in trainings and huge, massive things that they've been doing so far and all that. But we want to bring this to even a half-an-hour class or a 1 hour class. How can you utilize that 1 hour to make sure that your student gets maximum out of it? So design there's so many parts that come to it. It's not just the digital content. Digital content is sort of, I love Vitakshalav. We've been using it. Our teachers have been using it since 2013, actually. So it was there, but it's like another textbook online. That's about it. But how do we move forward? How do they use that as well as make it engaging? So there are available content, available gamified applications, everything available. And most of these are free of charge, actually, right? So how do we use these things? How do we compile these things and deliver a very engaging session online, maybe even using WhatsApp? Right? So it's not the platform that actually matters. I mean, everything is existing. So using that to create an engaging session is one of the most successful things that we actually saw this year. So apart from that engagement, the second thing I want to talk about is schools. Now, schools, obviously a couple of privileged schools I'm talking about here, who had to let go of their children, start online, and then there was this phase that they had to come back to school and then go back again, and it was quite messy, as you all know. It was a weird curve that we had in terms of education in the world. So we then sat and researched and figured out a second technique called the hybrid pedagogy, where you sort of maintain all your content, your work, your homework, your activities, everything online. But the only thing that differs when you go on and off is your teacher being online and your teacher being present physically. So that way you sort of have a consistency. You do not lose track of what you have done and what you haven't done, because something that mid of last year, what we realized that the teachers, sometimes this was in higher education actually, so the teachers or the lecturers who were teaching their students from a physical institution or a physical university, overnight we had to stay home. We were not prepared, and there was this whole chunk of people who said, I don't have any content because everything was in my work laptop or work PC, and I'm totally at loss for this. And the same thing happened to students as well, who accessed their content through their institutions and stuff. So they found it really tough. Some of them had to like sit and create it, or some of them had to like wait until they could physically go and get the content to start with. So this is something, so we use the cloud here. So the cloud is as a base to continuously maintain all the records and everything, and use this sort of technique in terms of doing that cross. So the future of the way we learn, I believe, is all believing in hybrid pedagogy as well as believing in engagement. I think engagement is so much important.
Thank you so much for that, Amra. I think that was very insightful as well, talking about how teachers have had to adapt and some of the strategies that they've used. I think later on we can come back to talk about some of the strategies you mentioned. But on that, I'd like to hear now from Jake, who works at code.org, to talk to us a little bit about what some of the learning content will look like in the future, the importance of teaching kids to code. As well as I think you will also touch a little bit on the importance of gamification and how that can be utilized in classrooms of the future.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be part of this conversation. It's been great to hear the insights from the other panelists. So grateful for the City Foundation and UNDP to putting together such an important conversation. I would say, so I mean, first, I represent code.org, which is a nonprofit organization that's based in the United States, but we we have partners around the world who are using our content and our resources to provide computer science lessons to students. And so, first, our mission is that every student in every school should have access to a high quality education. Specifically, our focus is on computer science, with a strong focus on reaching students who previously have been left out of these skills. So in most countries, that's young women. We have a strong focus on reaching young women, but also it's students from low income backgrounds, or whether it's groups that are from different racial groups or religious minorities, things like that. And so we always try to design programs in a way that can reach those students specifically. The reason why this is a big focus for us is there's a lot of reasons, but there's three that kind of stand out to me. So the first is it's a foundational skill to live in the modern world, right? So no matter what career path a student wants to go into, that career path is being upended by technology, right? So whether it's agriculture, whether it's law, medicine, really anything you can think of, education, right? These students need to have a foundational understanding of how these technologies work, so that they can use these technologies to create and not just be consumers of content. The second thing I would say is that these tools that are being built with technology are impacting everyone's life, and it shouldn't just be one segment of the global population that has this skill to create something that is then consumed by everyone else. We need to make sure that the people developing these skills represent all of us. And so I think that that's really important, which gets to my third point, which is I'm a strong believer in the power of technology to solve some of the greatest challenges that the world faces today, whether that's in education or in as we think about how solutions are being created for the pandemic, things like that. And so it's important that the people of Sri Lanka, in this case, right, have the skills to solve the problems that are going to be unique to people in Sri Lanka, because obviously they're the ones who best understand the circumstances, best understand what the solution needs to be and needs to look like. And so we're all about how do we empower that student to have the skills to then be able to build something that can solve a local need that they see in their community. And so as we think about these skills, there's kind of different ways that what this looks like for a teacher, and as we think about learning in the future, as well as what it looks like for the student. And so when I think about what the role of the teacher in a world where these are the kinds of skills that we have to pass on to students, the first is that we need to see teachers as guides rather than as just lecturers. Right? Rather than just someone who's just given a textbook and then they just read the textbook to the student and the student just absorbs the content. We have to really think about teachers and their role as kind of guiding those students. And so I think about we've trained over 100,000 teachers here in the United States to teach computer science. Our network of partners around the world have trained thousands more. And what we've found is that it's much easier to take a teacher from another subject, like a math teacher or a science teacher, and retrain them to be able to teach computer science to their students. That's easier than taking someone who's a software developer or who's an expert coder and to teach them how to teach that in the classroom, right? Those pedagogical approaches that the teacher has are critical, and we need to respect those and really, emphasize and hold those up. And so really just the way that we view the role of the teacher has to shift around that. The other thing I would say in relation to the teacher is that technology needs to enhance the abilities of a teacher and not replace a teacher. And I think that's been said by a lot of people on the panel today, is that we can't see that the technology is going to step in and do all the things that a teacher does. But technology has an amazing capability to increase the impact that teacher is able to have, and to make those human connections that are so important in education that I don't think will ever go away. Now, when we think about what this looks like for a student, I think one, especially as we see students learning computer science, but I think this applies across all different subjects, is that the students are more engaged when it's a creative endeavor rather than when it's just rote memorization, when they're just reading a textbook and trying to memorize everything. When they have the ability to take those skills and apply them in a way where they get to create something that they can be proud of, that they can show off, that's much more engaging for the students. And so as we think about what this looks like moving forward, it's providing those opportunities for students. And then the last thing I would mention on that is, and I think, again, this has been addressed by a lot of the panelists, is that we have to meet students where they are. And so whether that's, one, we're a nonprofit, all of our materials are free and open source. And that's really important to us because we want to make sure that that doesn't, cost, there's not a high bar for students to be able to access these materials. But whether it's making sure that it's being provided on devices that these students have access to, or even a lot of people think like, oh, in our country we have such a low usage of computers in the home, like how could we ever teach this? And one of the things that's core to our curriculum is what we call unplugged activities. So these are activities that don't use any sort of device, doesn't require a smartphone, doesn't require a computer. It can use just everyday household items, but it teaches computational thinking and these same principles that these students need to understand. So whether it's understanding loops or conditionals or things like that, but you're just using cups and strings and things that you can find around your house. And so that's something that we've seen a lot of our partners find success with during the pandemic, is taking these unplugged activities in packets and then going and deliver them to different families, and helping those students continue their learning even when they aren't reachable when it comes to internet access or devices. But yeah, and then the final point I would make is, as you talked about gamification, I think that it's going back to that, making it engaging for the students, right? So in our platform, we always try to make sure to use different characters, whether it's Disney characters or Minecraft characters, that they're recognizable to the students, that they're excited to engage with. As well as giving them an opportunity in the platform to show their progress through different levels that they go through the different things that they're able to create. One of the activities that we have is called Dance Party, and so you're moving around different blocks to provide an algorithm to teach a character how to dance to one of your favorite songs, right? So things like that really engage the students. But again, making sure that we do this in a way that can reach all students and not just those students who come from a privileged background who can access the technology. So yeah, I'll stop there, but thanks.
Thank you so much for that. I think that was particularly interesting in terms of how teaching kids computer science in these varied ways can actually serve as a sort of equalizer, like you said, because it's a skill that they can apply to a range of industries or sectors. And I think that's something we need to consider as well when we look at the future of learning. What is that content going to look like? So not just in terms of how it's going to be delivered, but what we're actually going to teach kids and how we're going to do that. I just have a couple of questions going back to some of the points that people raised. One, which I think is something that affects most of our audience here today, which is how assessments work in a sort of post-pandemic context where a lot of learning happens online. And perhaps I can address this question to Mr. Gunadasa, Dr. Gamage, and maybe Mr. Tavil and Frank would like to weigh in as well. But how do you think examinations and assessing children's progress will look like as we switch to a sort of hybridized learning model where part of learning happens online or at a distance. Do you think we're looking at a future in which perhaps standard examinations are not part of how we assess progress? Or do you think that model is still here to stay for quite some time? Will that require a bigger shift in how we think about learning?
Hello, who's?
Dr. Gamake, you can take a stab at it maybe.
Okay, yeah. It's about assessments.
Yes.
Yes. Assessments is most difficult one. I think if you have the technology, if you have the, the upper 20% or so use the technology, that is not a problem. You have Google Classroom and all the assessments are built into that. But we were thinking about the bottom 20%, 30% and so on. The thing is, we have to sort of think of solutions for each different level. So there's no one exactly. And then, you can't say, actually during the lockdown, some school people just actually continued within their communities. They continued to interact. The teachers were receiving and giving things. So I think physical exchange of, you finish something, you leave it at the gate, teacher comes and picks it at the gate, that kind of thing is happening.
Yeah.
So when we have the technology, that's happening. So I don't think it's only thing is center decreeing this should be the way is the worst thing to do. I think so letting people decentralizing and just telling people the outcome only, yes, we need to see assessments in these subjects, at least sort of that kind of reasonable. I think that's a way to go. I think for any kind of, as you said, the glass half full approach, use whatever you have to do what you need to do. Particularly these small communities, they are, some of these schools, 50% of our schools have less than 200 children. So they are all walk to school. Even in Colombo, we think of education in terms of these big schools, but most proper Colombo schools, the children walk to school, right? If you take Dabrema, I mean, everywhere, the Colombo schools, which are not national schools, the children walk to school. So the thing is, policies are made with these, people you meet every day, with those people in mind. So I think it's very important to look at the full scale surveys, always keep informed, particularly about the bottom 20%. I think so most bottom 20, 30%. And then decide policies based on those. The rest of them will take care of themselves. Assessment, this is it.
So it looks like exams are here to stay for a while. If anyone else
would like to about exams.
Exams as well. So not just in-class assessments, but how we actually sort of like in Sri Lanka, we have the grade 5 scholarship, you have the O-levels and the A-levels. And elsewhere as well, you have these sort of final qualifying exams. We've had some success in conducting them here. Of course, they've been in person, but would there be a shift in that as we look at the future of learning and content and how we assess progress? Is that a possibility of also shifting how we actually conduct these final assessments?
I think Mr. Gundas, I think they have some very interesting reforms in
based on the reforms that we are doing a big change in future. So as Dr. Gamage mentioned, answering your question about the assessments, schools, they are doing their local level assessments. In fact, recently I went visited a few schools. They have their own mechanism. Principal has identified the best possible mechanism to apply in his or her school. But when you are talking about the national level examination, in future with the current educational reforms, we are doing I should say paradigm shift of the education. So with a lot of module-based module-based teaching and learning process and allowing the students to do the self-learning, a lot of things will be changed, and also the school-based assessment will be one of the focal thing when we are talking about the reforms, although it is there at the moment, but it is not in the very high level. But in future, we will be able to focus on that while we are going on the way to the reforms part. So saying that, adding to the what you have mentioned previously, in some schools, we all need to understand that this is unexpected situation. So we didn't have the pre-prepared plans. Even the connectivity, even the government also facing this big challenge. So in the government, they are doing a lot of efforts, and also the ministries and the other departments also trying to provide the connectivity to the rural and remote area. So I think within 1 or 2 years, I have a very good hope that the Sri Lanka will become a very good place where we can talk about this connectivity and the online platform.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, we have to understand the ministries and all the NGOs and INGOs need to we all should work together and to find out the proper teaching and learning mechanism to deliver these contents in future. So that's what my experience throughout this last 15 years. And also I need to tell you all that eTaxala is not only providing the PDF contents. eTaxala, we have provided the PDF contents only for the textbooks part. So that is, we provide the respective lesson text copy in the copy of the textbook, allowing students to just to read the when they're going along the subject. So all the other than that, we have very good interactive lessons, and we have MCQs and all those things. I would request and I would welcome you to go through the content, and it is now very much very having a very good content based platform. Thank you.
Mr. Tavil, I noticed you unmuted yourself. If you'd like to add.
Yeah, I would. No, thanks for that, Sarika. I think, assessment is you've put your finger on the essential point. I think, one, with the reopening of schools, there's been also a rediscovery of sort of formative assessment, diagnostic. We had to see where students are after a period of closure or disruption or uneven opportunity in terms of educational continuity. So that has been rediscovered, and that's positive. In terms of examinations and high stakes examinations, one, we know that there are different educational traditions and philosophies across the world, but in many countries, high stake examinations are obviously a key part of the system. It's interesting to note also in the reopening strategies when we look across the world. In certain countries, reopening was prioritized for primary education, considering the social cost of actually keeping schools closed. In other areas, it was examination years that were prioritized, and that reflects that the importance given in those particular contexts to these examinations. But we also know that a number of countries have been forced to rethink examinations and school leaving exam because of the situation, and have looked to continuous assessment rather than the one selective, series of examinations. And I think that's a very positive way forward. And we have seen it again, like much of the innovation during this period, it's been imposed innovation in a sense. Just to end on that, but an interesting example pre-COVID, and to say why assessment is so crucial. Assessment and a change in assessment can really transform the learning paradigm of what we learn and how we learn. And it forces that change. And I take the example of some piloting that was done with allowing access to the internet during examinations. That completely changes how we approach learning and the competencies that need to be developed, and definitely propulses us away from a memorization-based transfer of information and knowledge to the types of competencies we would want in life, in work and beyond, of do we know how to access information? Can we critically process that information? Can we put different pieces of information together in order to synthesize and provide and propose something? So it forces a change, and I think that's why it's such a strategic area of intervention. Just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Frank, I think you've got your hand up. Is there something you'd like to add?
Yeah, thank you. And apologies in advance if my voice is breaking. I think I have a few internet issues here. So
No
hopefully you
worries.
can all hear me clearly. So far, so good. Yeah. Yeah, just a few, just to add to what's already been said on assessment. I think there's really a need to rethink assessment, especially in South Asia, I would say. But things that are maybe obvious to those who work in assessment are not necessarily obvious to teachers, to school leaders, but things which should actually be common knowledge. For example, the fact that assessment is always for learning. Sorry, I see my internet connection is unstable. I hope you can still hear me. But all assessment is for learning. Yeah. So there's a distinction often made between, like summative and formative and having, assessment to see whether you're going to pass the grade, what your score is. But actually all assessment should be for learning, whether in different ways, to help parents and caregivers and teachers and students to progress with their learning. And another thing is that assessment is not just tests. A lot of things are included under the umbrella of assessments, like teacher observation, question and answer, quizzes, just looking at, marking exercises. So that's another thing I think that, just to broaden that a bit. And the third one is, and also to touch upon what Dr. Tawil has mentioned around the importance of social-emotional skills and other areas, which are very difficult to assess, but there's organizations like PISA that have made a lot of progress in measuring 21st century skills like collaborative problem solving. Those are also really important to assess, and the risk of not assessing them is that they're going to be neglected comparatively, because the school will focus on things which can be easily assessed. So I think there's a lot of innovation happening in that space. It'll be really interesting to see where that goes. And maybe just talk about some opportunities and challenges linked to what you mentioned in the COVID context and the post-COVID context. I think in terms of digitization, there's a lot of opportunity. There's the opportunity for automatically scoring tests. There's the opportunity for tests to be adjusted automatically to the student level, which is a really interesting trend that is happening more and more at larger and larger scale, where you can really see what level a student is, because what happened before is that tests might be too easy, tests might be too hard. Now the test will adapt to the student and you can really see much better where they're at. Another opportunity is that digital activities and online platforms allow for tracking what students are actually doing. So teachers can have a dashboard and things like, I don't know if you have it in code.org, but some platforms you can just kind of see how they've been progressing. That's also really a big advantage, can be leading to accreditation systems and things like that. And now just very briefly on that, just 2 or 3 challenges is that, in the COVID response, in school closures, a lot of these things couldn't be monitored because students might not be using an online platform. They might not be able to do an online test. A lot of assessment is about being face-to-face with the teachers, and that was not happening. So that also, I think, requires some rethinking and innovation. For example, if a student submits something that they say also, well, my parent really helped with those parts. This is the end result. It might get 100%, but I really needed help with those parts. So I've seen that for teachers, it's really difficult to see what students have actually been learning during school closures at home. And when they come back to school, that they have to kind of reassess where they really are at. So I guess, and also doing assessments when there's no technology in the home. So we've been involved in a project to develop a phone-based assessment, like a simple phone and actually asking questions, and that's the assessment. So there's challenges, but also lots of opportunities. And we're about to launch also an assessment platform, a South Asia assessment platform with partners, including UNESCO being one of our main partners. So very excited about that. And that'll be online in about a month or so. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that was really interesting as well. And especially in terms of sort of monitoring students' actual position in terms of what they've learned and what they've been able to absorb, which I think is something we tend to overlook. We expect everyone to progress in the same way, everyone to learn at the same pace. So adjusting for that as well, I think is key. And also understanding that different people learn in different ways is something else that we've been talking a lot about in terms of reshaping the classroom and how content is delivered as well. I'm just going to remind our audience that you can share your questions in the Q&A chat, or you can just type it into the chat box. We are taking questions. I think most of y'all have answered some of them. I do have one question for Amra, and maybe Jake could take a stab at it as well, which is looking at sort of how we develop content. There's a question in the Q&A section that talks about the need to kind of improve students' social behavior, so whether it's engagement in class, and that's something that we see happening in the classroom as well, where kids with, who are disruptive tend to either be overlooked, or kids who are quieter tend to be overlooked. Is there a way in which we can address some of these gaps, either through sort of the games that we incorporate into teaching, or I think Amra mentioned a technique, DDE. What are some other ways in which we might be able to continue to engage with kids in a classroom setting, especially a virtual one or a hybridized classroom? And how do we sort of encourage positive social behaviors within an online social setting? I've heard reports of, say, Zoom classrooms where kids just stay on mute, or they vanish, or they play little tricks where they say still connecting, and the teacher's kind of waiting on there. So how do you kind of encourage kids to sort of, how do you reinforce positive social behaviors in a virtual classroom? Is there a way of doing that?
Yes, Sarika. Jake, if you don't mind, I would like to take it first. Yeah, so quite a lot of gimmicks that we've also come across in the past year of how these guys tend to look like they're in the online class, but they don't. So thankfully, we haven't experienced anything like that firsthand. The reason is because, continuing on the DDE technique, when it comes to engagement, what we make use of is something called the collaborative tools. And collaborative tools come in so many different forms, right? For example, there are so many free tools out there, like the Mentimeter, Kahoot, and AHA Slides, and the Padlet, and Jamboard. I could go on and on and on. What we found out was, when rather than a teacher speaking about something or lecturing about something, we found out that collaborative work, as well as working on collaborative tools, immediately brings engagement from any sort of participant, any sort of learner. And this has been this is also a way of how we empathize with them as well, because trust me, all of us find it difficult to listen to anything at a stretch, right? And as a teacher, we must be able to empathize this from our students, especially because when they've gone through the shift of physical education, missing out their friends, being stuck at home, and being forced to actually attend online classes, it has been really tough for them. And the fact that we not empathizing them and expecting them to do homework on a daily basis and all of that is sort of like takes a very heavy toll on them. So gamifying this, but when I say gamify, it doesn't have to sound very technological. It can be utilized in your classrooms. For example, even within a Zoom platform, I'm not touching on the other platforms, but if I just take Zoom as a platform, there's so much of gamification you can use within Zoom itself. For example, the rename function, or the whiteboard function, or just adding pictures to your chat box. So for example, there was one technique where just abruptly, while a lesson is going on, the teacher just asked the student to add an emoticon onto the chat, just to show how they feel, right? So emojis are a Gen X thing, but it plays a heavy social emotional value in a class, actually. So the fact that you could use emojis to get the students to express themselves, or GIFs, for example. So these are little tiny techniques that you can use in the form of engagement to make the students' life better in terms of learning, actually make it a bit more interesting. Over to you, Jake.
I think that's all great, and definitely, I would echo all of those sentiments. Just finding ways the things that students are interested in, right, and meeting them there and engaging them. Kind of going back to the question about behavior, students who have behavioral issues. I think that in those cases, at least in my own I've seen, a lot of times that's the symptom of a deeper problem, which is that the student isn't being engaged at their appropriate level. And I think this is something that was touched on earlier, is right, like, is this content too hard for the student? Is this content not hard enough for the student? And when that match isn't aligned, right, then the student can get bored or the student can get frustrated, and it manifests itself in different ways. And so I think there is a really, a possibility here for technology to help, help teachers in addressing this. And so, one thing on our platform, we try to build in kind of choice options. So students who get to the end of a lesson before the rest of the other students in their class, there's an option for kind of, okay, here's another level that you try to, kind of go to, experience more or dive a little bit deeper, and they can choose based on what their own interests are. But this is being done in a lot of ways, even more advanced, using artificial intelligence, right, where the platforms can kind of assess over time how students are progressing, and then suggest, okay, if you're at this level, this is the next skill that you should learn, things like that. Obviously, I think the way that this is being done the most is by a teacher in person, right? They look at the different students, they assess their skills, but expecting a teacher in a class of 20, 30 students to be able to provide a personalized learning pathway for each individual student, and that's just asking a lot of something that the teachers are already swamped with so much. And so finding ways to use technology to support teachers, to make their lives a little bit easier when it comes to that, I think, one, takes the burden off of teachers, and two, I think can solve a lot of these core issues of students, and their kind of behavioral issues, because again, what is the cause, rather than just focusing on the symptom or the way that it's manifesting itself.
Thank you for that. We have a few minutes left. I'd just like to check if anyone in the audience has any further questions that you'd like to maybe address to a particular panelist, or just a question in general.
Hi, Sarika. I just want to highlight one thing regarding the our platform. So
Yes,
you know that it is not possible to open whitelist all the services provided by a different type of organization for the students. So therefore, we have discussed with the TRC, and we managed to get the whitelisting facility for the Ethaxalava. So that's why we are trying to facilitate Ethaxalava through visa Ethaxalava for the students. They don't need the data cost is not there. So you just need the connectivity facility. So I think if you all can support the Ethaxalava by giving your ideas, and your criticism are welcome. So we can make use that Ethaxalava for the national platform, focus in the next generation's online teaching and learning process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gunadasa. I think that's another very valid point, especially the fact that the Ethaxalava has been whitelisted. I think one of the biggest problems we faced, even in Sri Lanka, and I'm sure this is applicable elsewhere, is students actually accessing some of these virtual platforms, and the cost of doing that, especially in terms of data. Not everybody has access to, say, a standard traditional data package or internet package. A lot of students, I think, rely, especially those using mobile phones, on those sort of top-up cards. So sort of looking at these different hacks or ways in which you can ensure access to whitelisting, whether it's whitelisting particular applications or creating sort of tailor-made data packages for students, is something that we've seen happen in Sri Lanka with telecommunication providers, creating sort of Zoom packages. I just wanted to check from some of our international participants as well here. Are there other examples of this sort of packaging being provided, or this sort of supportive infrastructure being put in place that has allowed, say, students to overcome these gaps in accessing devices or connectivity?
Just to come in on that quickly, and just to mention the Global Education Coalition that UNESCO has brought together, and that includes major telecom providers, tech partners, and there have been examples of supporting for free data for educational purposes in a number of contexts, and we could share some of those with you if you would be interested, and these come from different countries around the world.
Yes, please. I think that would be very interesting to see. If there are no further questions, I think we are almost up for time. So just thank you so much to each and every one of you for sharing your thoughts. I think it's been a very interesting discussion. You've given me a lot of food for thought, and I'm sure our audience has had a lot to absorb and take in as well. It's been really interesting understanding not just, as Dr. Gamage said, some of the challenges and solutions being found on the supply side, but also on the importance of understanding things from a demand side and looking at how we actually work to bridge some of the existing inequalities in access to a quality education, especially when we look at the future of education and learning. Because I think the most important thing, like some of you highlighted, is that human aspect, ensuring that we're able to continue to meet not just the needs of educators, but the needs of students, ensuring that we keep them engaged, that we're able to provide them with the best possible education, and that they're able to also keep up and learn things that fall within their lines of interest as well. So thank you so much for joining us today. It's been interesting and a stimulating discussion as well. And thank you to our audience as well. I've seen a lot of questions pop in, and I know the panelists have taken it on themselves to answer those, which has been fantastic. So thank you so much, and thank you to the organizing team as well. And with that, we'll call it, we'll wrap it up with that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sarika.
Thank you very much. Thanks.